So we are clearly, as Holly's already suggested this morning, in a moment of temptation, right? We're on this mountaintop and we're staring around north and south and east and west, and everywhere that we look, empires are flexing their muscles. Bombs are falling all over our small little planet. Even someone like Hegseth will boast of all of the destruction, of killing leaders and destroying targets, without mentioning the children's school that was destroyed, and the girls that were killed. We talk about Gaza here a lot, and over 70,000 in Gaza have been killed by bombs. 20,000 or more were children. The Ukrainians are fighting for their lives. It's hard not to take their side, right? Because the empire of Russia is breathing down their neck, and the American empire and the European empire trying to figure out when to join in. In the meantime, 4 years of bombing has taken a huge toll, I'm sure, on their bodies, on their psyches, on their communities, on both sides, really. We rarely talk about the environmental footprint of this destruction. The massive use of fossil fuels and the contamination of Ukraine's resources, their farmland, their air, their water. Our military is actually the largest emitter of greenhouse gases as an institution in the entire world. And we emit more CO2 than a lot of European nations on their own. And these bombs, we can say that we know where they're built, right here in Kansas City. 150 Highway and Botts Road, the National Security Campus, it's called. The city makes money leasing the land to the NNSA. The bombs are dropped with stealth bombers parked right here in our state. So on the mountain, the evil one lies to us and says, this will bring peace. Well, the text today comes from a section on the Sermon on the Mount that people have called the antithesis. Like, you have heard it said, but I say to you. It's kind of like a pattern, and there's like 6 of those, right? You've heard it said, don't kill anyone. I say, work on your anger. You've heard it said, no adultery. I say, work on your lust. And this is the pattern. Calling them an antithesis is a bit of a problem because it makes Jesus sound like he's doing away with his entire tradition. But in the previous verse, he's very clear. I didn't come to do away with the law. The prophets, they're our moral code. I'm here to fulfill it. I'm here to fill it fuller. The tradition doesn't take us quite far enough in the world we're living in. Let's expand on it. Let's explore creative alternatives to business as usual. So Jesus says, your rabbi told you don't kill anyone, but I'm saying, again, work on your anger and start there. Your judges tell you eye for an eye, to limit the revenge and to make things more equitable. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. Your politicians are telling you to love your neighbors and your family, your nieces and your uncles and your beloved grandparents, your fellow citizens, and do whatever you can to keep them safe. But I say to you, even your enemy deserves to be treated with respect and goodness and love. It's hard not to feel this is unrealistic and not very pragmatic in our world. Or it feels passive to us. Are we just going to roll over and play the victim? But the early church didn't hear it this way, and they were a minority. The monks and the Quakers and Christian abolitionists didn't hear it that way. They heard it as strength. Desmond Tutu and Oscar Romero and Dorothy Day and Ella Baker, they heard it as power of some kind. Well, this phrase, don't resist evil, is kind of an unfortunate translation, and some of our teachers like Clarence Jordan and Walter Wink have given us a new translation. I wish it were used more in our translations, but it's not. This Greek verb, antistenai, it's often translated do not resist, this passive kind of feeling. But actually, if you take the root of the word, anti, against, and stenai means armed revolt. So it's more like do not revolt with violence. Be against armed revolt. Resist with armed revolt without violence. Fight back without violence. Resist evil non-violently. Or fight evil without becoming evil. It kind of reminds me of that beautiful quote by Audre Lorde. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. You can't defeat empire with empire's weapons. You just recreate empire. Well, then Jesus goes on to give some examples of this. Like if someone slaps you on the cheek, the one that gets talked about a lot, turn your other. That's in relationship to a boss or a master in his context. Or if someone takes your shirt, give them your cloak. In his context, that's reference to a creditor. Or if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go a second, in reference to the way soldiers occupied Palestine. But they're very culturally specific, right? Kind of hard for us to get in there. But they do say one thing in common. That is, how might we engage people who are socially superior or have legal and political power over us? How do we engage them? If you take these examples together, they invite us to look for a power when we think we are powerless. Or when we are being oppressed, to look for alternative ways to push back. Fighting or running away concedes their power, really, in their own kind of ways. So how do we access our moral compass, and how do we find strength that affirms our dignity as individuals and our dignity as communities? I had coffee with an organizer last week, and she's this really skilled organizer and teacher or trainer. She works a lot with parents in the school district who are trying to get change. And she said, basically organizing is power and agency. And we're not powerless. But everything else kind of shakes down from that once you understand how power works. We need to learn to see, she said, power with, like locking arms, holding hands, being firm together, versus power over, which is like domination system, right? And when we access that power we can access that power through our personal agency. So when Jesus says turn the other cheek, we can translate it into claim your agency. You know, Renee Macklin Good, she was a threat because she smiled, right? That was threatening. She was a threat because she said, dude, I'm not mad at you. The ICU nurse filming the ICE officers, he was just embodying his Hippocratic oath. Do no harm. But his living in freedom angered and frightened these officers. Both Good and Preddy believed, I think, that they had the power to change and overcome evil by turning the other cheek, right? By wielding the power of goodness. Love your enemies and pray for them. We have, I think, in the Sermon on the Mount, one of the few creeds that we might find in the gospel. That is, and it's just really a statement of Jewish belief. We believe in a God who is merciful and who is unbiased. Divine love, we believe, is impartial. That means when it rains on ICE agents, it rains on us, right? And that means when the sun shines on people behind the podiums or people sitting in the pews, the sun is also shining on January 6th rioters. I don't have any special access to God's love and mercy and grace any more than they do. Human agency is powerful, but we don't stand alone. We believe that God's Spirit is always present with us in what we are doing, birthing in us hope in spite of all the bombs that are falling around us. Yeah, Jesus said we need a strategy. How are we going to face people who are in power? We need training. We need commitment. But, you know, that doesn't always produce the results that we want in the moment that we want them. It doesn't always feel practical or timely. And so Jesus also says we need to love and pray. We don't live by activism alone. And you know, the whole next chapter after this chapter 5 is what? It's all about how to pray and all the different ways to pray and the different spaces to pray and how not to be focused on false public piety, but to be constant, daily, listening, broadening our hearts, opening ourselves up to the kingdom. When we come here for this reason, to remind ourselves that what we're doing today, the prayers, the singing, the reading, the scripture, what we do sometimes in the week, meeting each other at the borough or eating together in one another's homes, making bags for the unhoused, learning from Brad's Sunday school class, breaking bread here or at Micah Ministry or at Cherith Brook. When we do those together, we're reminded of who we are. One of the most meaningful things that I've done as a peacemaker is very menial, but very fun. It used to happen every 4th of July for about a half a dozen years, started in like 2011. And a couple of days before the 4th, I never knew exactly when, but I might be out in the garden or I was taking out the trash or doing the laundry at Cherith Brook or something, and Father Carl Cabot from St. Louis would pull up in his old clunker car. I mean, picture a maroon 1995 Pontiac Grand Prix. No working AC, the windows are rolled down, he's sweating profusely, smoking a cigarette. And I'd walk over and, hey Carl, how's it going? What's bringing you into town? I'm here to celebrate the 4th of July. We'd chat a little bit about it, how his drive was and how the folks at the St. Louis Catholic Worker are doing, and where are you staying? Well, I'm planning to stay with you. That's his version of asking. And then on the night before the 4th of July, he would say, could you give me a ride tomorrow? Sure, where you need to go? And he says, well, I'm going to pray. I'd get up early and I'd find Carl already leaning up against the car, and he's dressed up like he's going to Mass, this good priest, you know, black suit, a little faded and grayish looking by now, white collar. And then he adds to that a little bit of flair. He's got a St. Louis Rams ball cap and some Air Jordans untied. Do you want any breakfast before we go, Carl? I'm having breakfast, he would say, cigarette, coffee in hand. Then he'd pull this bag out from Ace Hardware store, and there's a can of red spray paint in it and a hammer. I'd drive him south, and I would drop him off. And one year it was at the railroad tracks. The other year it was in front of the Kansas City National Security plant. Then I wouldn't hear from him, and in a couple of days he'd call me and have me pick him up at 12th and Cherry. In front of the jail, he'd be sitting there on the wall. Over the years, Carl spray painted the signs, and he dumped red paint on the front door. He put sugar in a bulldozer gasoline tank. He put a sledgehammer to the window of a bulldozer. Then he'd sit down and he'd wait for the police to come. Now this was during Carl's retirement, I'll tell you. So, but some of you may know him from his years as a plowshare activist. He would dress up as a clown, and he would carry a jackhammer, and he would break into nuclear weapons sites where, like the silos and maybe other places, and he would protest war by just trying to create some kind of destruction there. In 1984, he and 3 other people actually broke into the Minutemen missile silos that we had spread throughout Missouri, which we had in almost every county until like 1995. They were arrested there, sitting in a circle, singing, holding hands, talking to one another. Carl did 10 years of prison of an 18-year sentence for that action. And over his lifespan, he served more than 17 years in prison. And you know, once when he was interviewed, he said, I wear a clown suit and carry a jackhammer to remind Christians that we must be fools for Christ, that justice is serious, and that nuclear weapons are insane. That's why I do this. That's my ministry. He didn't see himself as a radical. It might sound to us that way. But he did say, my principle is to do just what I can do and then go and sing and dance. Thank you, Carl. Amen.